Bismillah.
Good morning and
Please.
Good morning and assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. I, Zahra Niazi, on behalf of President CAS Air Marshal Javed Ahmed, welcome you all to the book launch for the edited volume titled Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, Innovation and Vulnerability in the Digital Economy. Before we begin the proceedings of the day, I request your attention to the recitation from the Holy Quran.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
يؤتي الحكمة من يشاء ومن يؤت الحكمة فقد أوتي خيرا كثيرا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب.
He gives wisdom to whom He wills, and whoever has been given wisdom has certainly been given much good, and none will remember except those of understanding.
صدق الله العظيم.
Ladies and gentlemen, the co-editor of the volume, Dr. Usman Chohan, serves as advisor to President CAS on economic affairs and national development, and this is his 8th successfully completed book project in the past 6 years. The book serves as an additional milestone in the larger program of Dr. Chohan's examination of the digital economy's potential. Spanning the work of 11 authors from 8 countries and 7 academic disciplines, the edited volume serves as the definitive multidisciplinary account of decentralized autonomous organizations and shall have a lasting impact on the study of blockchain technology. Despite their comparatively short history, a substantial research interest had emerged over the past 4 years on decentralized autonomous organizations, with Dr. Chohan's work being among the most cited on the subject in the world. As such, CAS is proud to celebrate the successful completion of this book project and to share the key findings from the book. I would now like to invite Dr. Chohan to present the key insights and findings from the book. Please, sir.
May I begin with your permission, sir? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My dear colleagues, Amma, Assalamu alaikum. Today is a moment of celebration for CAS. This is my 8th book, and I first want to extend my gratitude to President CAS. Back in the day when we were first working on CAS, sir, I had 0 books under my belt. Today is number 8. So we've come a long way in a short time. Alhamdulillah. This is book number 8. It is a co-edited volume, which means that the mantle of managing the project is done by more than one person. And for the first time, mera naam sabse aage nahi hai. It's the first time among my books that my friend and colleague Sven Van Kerckhoven is this. Because मैं चाह रहा था कि ये भी थोड़ी जिम्मेदारी उठाए. And this is a book that follows in the same category as book number 5 and book number 7, that it is related to the thorough understanding of a specific subject. A specific subject. In book number 5, it was about the role of the small-scale investor. Like, for example, let's say Shahir or Shah Muhammad or Bilal would like to invest on the stock market. If they pool their energies together, what sort of power can they have? And this ultimately became the definitive account of this, or aaj bhi isko kafi citations milti hain. It came to coin the term YOLO capitalism, jisko farogh diya ja raha hai. Book number 7, jiski launch humne ki thi in April, was on a specific blockchain technology called NFTs. To date, that is still the most cited work I have done. And similar to that book 7, another offshoot of blockchain technology is decentralized autonomous organizations, yani DAOs. So you can think of book number 7 and 8 as twins, because they both look at specific digital economy technology. So this is partly emerging technology and partly economics. And we try to look at it from all angles. ये एक खसूसियत है इन 3 किताबों की कि एक मुफस्सिल जो है तज्ज़िया हो रहा है और it takes it from every angle I consider possible. When I work on a book project, there are 4 principles I try to incorporate as best I can. The first is a diversity of perspectives. For many issues in technology, it will be very Eurocentric or North America-centric, whereas the consumption or even production of the technology itself will be international. So why would you concentrate the perspectives on one area? You should bring as much diversity as possible. The second is impartiality. So in all 3 of these books, and all the other books I have worked on as well, the idea is not that I come in with a perspective or a bias of my own, but rather that you as the reader determine what you want from it, what you arrive at your own conclusion from reading it. So, गैर जानबदारी बहुत ज़रूरी होती है. The third is thoroughness. So if this book is 80,000 words, those 80,000 words should be a lasting work on the subject. It should be so thorough that no matter what interest or background you come from, whether you're a legal scholar, whether you're an economist, whether you are a computer science expert, you should see the full picture from it. And the fourth is creativity. Since these things are cutting edge by their very nature, it is not necessary for us to follow any existing template, but to build the template ourselves, the creativities. These are principles that apply to this. In this case, you will see that there is a diversity of authors that participated in it. The red squares around Sven and myself, we are the editors, and these are the contributors. They come from different disciplines, they come from different countries, although compared to book 7, the body of contributors is Eurocentric because the nature of this technology is more concentrated than for NFTs. So that natural concentration means that the expertise also is there. So it is diverse, but I would say it's not as diverse in authorship as the NFT book was.
Dr. Saab, you look like Saif Ali Khan.
Very kind, sir.
There's a striking resemblance.
Very kind, sir. Yet, you are complimenting Saif Ali Khan, of course. And so you see, sir, that the diversity is still very Eurocentric. So there is somebody from Pakistan, yours truly. You have United States, France, United Kingdom, and Australia. That's not European, precisely. But then there's Ireland, Belgium, Germany. So that is good, but it isn't quite what it was with NFTs. In the NFT book, we had 4 people from South Africa, 2 whites and 2 blacks. We had somebody from China. It was really quite interesting and enriching, but that is just the nature of the beast. Gender diversity, the ideal would be 50-50. We are close, but not quite there. And it's all right, because we wouldn't ever formulate our authorship based on this. It's just a happenstance. Now, when I say cover all angles and give you the details, you will see that there is quite a bit in this in terms of how you want to tackle that. I will explain what this technology is, but just to understand what we are studying as a whole, we want to talk about its legal basis. It's very important. We want to talk about the narratives around it. We want to talk about, this is my area, of course, economic incentives, governance challenges. That is very particular to DAOs as opposed to other blockchain offshoots. Governance is a big part of it, and I'll explain why. I had a chapter on the philosophical basis because I'm very interested in the philosophy of such things. The historical context is given in the introduction as well as in some chapters. Design features was a technical aspect that computer science experts spoke to, and community building is a very big part of it. In fact, I would say that governance and community building are essential elements of DAOs. Why do I say that? Well, first let's see why I picked this at all. Aapko yaad hoga, everybody sitting here, that book 7, and this is about 2 months old, this image, but was the most cited, it still is, but ye dekhen yahan pe aage, number 3 pe. And so it is a very important part. Why not take a paper that you write and it's well cited and make something bigger out of it? That is the logic of it. And I could in principle do that with all of these. Particularly ye jo niche hai, iski bhi book 11, 12 banti hai in the future. So that is the logic behind. If the people are so interested in it, why wouldn't you take it further? I had written a paper on this a long time ago. You can say pre-CAS. And in those days, there was not so much literature on this stuff. Now there is plenty, as you can infer from the number of citations that have occurred since then. But back in the day, in timing is very important in research. अगर आपने वक्त पे काफ़ी जल्दी चीज़ लिख दी है तो फिर आप आगे निकल जाते हैं इस दौड़ में क्योंकि लोग फिर आपकी चीज़ पढ़ के अपनी चीज़ लिखते हैं. So timing is very important in that. And this was a paper I had written, and they were just my rough thoughts. And I was wondering, क्या ये एक शुगली चीज़ है या is this a serious technology? The same question as with NFTs, with book 7. क्या ये ऐवी शुगली चीज़ है या इसमें क्या कोई काम की बात भी है और वाकई काम की बात ज़रूर है. आप इसका वज़न देख लें. This is worth $22 billion in 2024. It was even higher when blockchain was at a higher speculative and higher investor interest phase, 2021 के लिए मिसाल के तौर पे. तो आप इसका मुआज़ना यूँ कर लें. What are the exports of Pakistan? It is about $25 billion. What is the size of your remittances? It's about $33 billion roughly. So it's in the scope of that level of economic activity. What we're talking about is total treasury, which is a metric used in this to determine how much volume is invested capital, या capitalization के लिए. It's a big deal. It's very lucrative. And there are many organizations involved in this area working on DAOs. They are, you can see, 218 that exceed a high threshold. Yani more than $1 million is invested. There's at least 200. And there's at least almost 11 million people involved in this stuff, at least people who hold the tokens of this technology. And then people who are very active is more than 3 million. So, there is a buzzing world out there in the digital sphere, which you will not hear about in the mainstream media, even in the economic press. There is a world out there of people doing their own stuff, mostly youngsters from all around the world. Here are some estimates of what they are doing. And this is also data from a few months ago. See, August. So there is a world going out there. Now I should explain what this is to begin with. Imagine that you can manage the affairs of an organization entirely digitally and through algorithms, pre-programmed. For example, we all decide to create an investment pool which doesn't operate with our daily intervention, but rather it works through algorithms. The algorithm is called the smart contract. It is neither a contract nor is it smart. It has limitations, but we program if this happens, then this, and if this happens, then this, and then we sit back. So you have this automation of the organization. Investment pool is just one idea, but you can have entire voting systems run on this through an algorithm. So this is the power of the 21st century technology, that using blockchain's maintenance of the record digitally and having algorithms process everything, you can have an entirely new construction of organizations possible. That is what DAOs are. They have no central authority. The algorithm works on its own. And decisions made around what should be done with the results of the algorithm, or even the operating mechanism that you put in place, that is designed by the token holders. So people like us, we together can create a DAO, we set out the parameters of it, and then it operates, and then we, trusting in it working right, proceed with it. It is an alternate estimate, and if it seems weird to you, keep in mind that there are many people involved in this, and keep in mind that there's a lot of money put into this, that this is a sign of the confidence in it. हालांकि चीज़ अभी तक बनी नहीं है. Our understanding of traditional organizations is that decision making happens at the top, and then the instructions get passed down and execution happens at the mid and lower levels. With a DAO, it's more so the proposals are made, decision making is done, with everybody pitching in depending on their level of interest, depending on the stake they have in the organization, and so on. So it is a different conceptualization of how things can be organized. You see the replica of this, but the diagram more interesting here is, of course, this, that you have different nodes, different people. Mining here is mining in the sense of producing the tokens, use the digital tokens used, and then people are interacting at various stages. So it seems more chaotic when you put it like this, but for certain purposes it may be more useful. That's where DAOs became an area of interest, certainly an important application of blockchain technology, because once blockchain technology came into existence after 2008, people began to wonder how it could be used, and one of the interesting possibilities was DAO. The DAO ecosystem, the numbers you saw before, are spread out across many organizations, and they can be put into broad categories which are not always fully accurate because some DAOs do multiple things. But for example, you can run a social media type system through this smart contract algorithmic programming, and it does the stuff. My favorite ones are investment DAOs, because it surprises me how much money is put into these, and they do function. They do function. This is also a similar idea, but rather than an investment pool, the idea is to give grants for projects. And some of these are environmentally focused and things of that sort, depending on the area of interest. This one is very, very important. It's called Uniswap because this DAO's job is to provide liquidity to other cryptocurrencies, including the second most important cryptocurrency called Ethereum. So it provides liquidity based on that कि ये reserve है तो जैसे इसकी ज़रूरत पड़े ये आ जाता है मंडी में लोगों के इस्तेमाल के लिए. Service DAOs, protocol DAOs, so this is very technical stuff, और ये Uniswap मिलता जुलता है from this main Uniswap. So it does multiple things. So there is no shortage of creative ideas, and there's no shortage of people interested in it. And keep in mind that this was 2 years ago at the peak. But I presume that more and more ideas are to come. But it is a vast decentralized universe out there in the virtual shadow where people are working quietly with interest. So what you should gather from the idea is that this book covers this technology from multiple angles, trying to understand the ecosystem and become a definitive account of this world. Just as an idea, it isn't easy to understand as a system. And one diagram used by one of our authors in a chapter literally looks like this. And you see that what you should infer from this diagram is simply that there are many moving parts to how it is done. And that is why people are not so easily attracted or ready to jump in it, because there are so many moving parts. They do struggle at the beginning to understand. And this book can help to bridge that gap so that more people from different walks of life are able to understand. The book is dedicated, this is my choice, to those who dream of reorganizing the world, because organization is the key concept here. How do you organize capital? How do you organize communities? Organization done in a different way. And the quote that I drew upon, because I have long been fascinated by the anarchist literature, going back 200 years, is that people 200 years ago, when digital technologies were inconceivable, were already thinking of how to reorganize society as modernism took place, as industrialization took place. Usman, our guest speaker, talked about the Industrial Revolution and its impacts on warfare. The Industrial Revolution had a deep psychological impact also, and people began to yearn for different modes of organizing the world. So, weary of these wars, weary of the miseries which they cause, society rushes to seek a new organization. We're still rushing to it, but we haven't yet found it, because industrial capitalism is still dominant, although it has fallen out of favor, certainly. And through the complexity of interests and the progress of ideas, society is forced to abjure the state, the central command and the central system. Beneath the apparatus of government, under the shadow of its political institutions, society was slowly and silently producing its organization. This means we working together to build a new reality, making for itself a new order which expressed its vitality and autonomy. This is an impulse that has been there for a long time. So I use this to inform a book that is 21st century. So literature from the 1800s or early 1900s is informing the literature of the 2020s. There are 3 layers primarily, and then within that we break it further. There is an economic aspect to that. Aapne wo $22 billion ka number dekha tha. It is a vehicle for allocating wealth creation and investment. It is a social aspect, because there is a strong affinity depending on the DAO. Some it's very strong, some it is so-so, but some it is extremely strong. Community building and digital communities, depending on the DAO. There is a social aspect to this. And then there is, of course, the technological aspect, that how new technologies, emerging technologies, enable us to do things in interesting ways. Ye minimum, kam as kam, 3 teh pe mabni hai. Uske alawa, we also looked at the sociology, public policy, the math, and the law. And so the book is fundamentally structured, आप सब ये देख सकेंगे, in two parts. पहला हिस्सा तो ये कि समझाएं ये चीज़ है क्या. मैंने तो आपको बड़ा मुख्तसर सा बताया है, लेकिन इसको समझने के लिए वक्त लगता है. मुझे भी बहुत लगा था जब मैंने ये पहले लिखा था. तो बुनियादी चीज़ें समझ के फिर we go into the opportunities and the challenges. So Zara will remember that NFT's structure was quite different, where it looked at the good stuff and the bad stuff. Here it looks at understanding it, and then good and bad is put together. The applied part is the second half. You see? And the outline ended up looking like this. This is how chapter 1 expresses it. You see the part 1 is the essentials of the DAOs, and then the opportunities and challenges are put together. And this is a more reasonable way of organizing this book. So, in the introduction, we lay out, my co-author and I, what is the deep thinking we aspire to on this subject? What is our purpose here? And then why we are being ambitious, why we hold ambitions about this subject. You see, my co-editor Sven had published a paper on this, and I had a paper that had various iterations, which was well cited. So there are reasons for us to be interested in this. Now, chapter 2 then proceeds into the public policy. So Sven looks at basic problems in public policy today. I would go back to the quote previously about how people are tired sometimes of the way things are organized. There are issues of acumen, accountability, cooperation, and centralization in the way things are organized in the world today. Then two Irish professors, Paul and Doncha, they have a model that was applied in Book 7. They also contributed to Book 7, so they are partners of ours, very brilliant people. They use the same model for NFTs, and in Book 7, and in Book 8 they apply it to this technology. Their model is based on 3 elements: the hash, bash, and cache. The hash meaning the technology, because hash function is part of how you produce bitcoins. Bash meaning getting together the community aspect. NFTs का एक मुख्तलफ सा माहौल है, और DAOs, DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, इसको अक्सर हम DAO कहते हैं. DAO का जो social है मुख्तलफ है. Plus the cache, which is the economic aspect, that has a different calculus for this technology as opposed to the other one. And they use an ethno-resonance approach. This is very fascinating. In chapter 3, because what they do is they insert themselves into the community. To write this chapter, they get involved with the community and understand how it works, and then they draw lessons from that, कि ये चीज़ हो क्या रही है, लोग करते क्या हैं, लोग सोचते कैसे हैं. It's very anthropological. You sit with the people to discern their community traits and features. And their analysis rests on the idea that different elements of blockchain technology have different community, economic, and technological aspects, although the umbrella above them is the same. How they manifest is quite different. Then I got into the anarchism. If you look at the philosophy of anarchism as it has evolved over 200 years, there have been many offshoots, and anarchism is often described as a river, and the river has many bends, different offshoots. So I tied the extent to which DAO really does reflect this. In some ways, it does speak to this philosophical river, and in other ways, it doesn't. So you have a bit of yes and a bit of no. That's what this chapter seeks to understand, so that people do not just dive into a technology without understanding a wider historical and philosophical context. Finally, ये मैंने थोड़े से formulas यहाँ लगाए हैं researchers को डराने के लिए, because this is the math behind the DAOs. And there is an American professor, Craig Calcaterra, and he did a lot of the mathematization in this chapter of how DAOs would work. और ये सारे formulas मुझे गौर से पढ़ने पड़े थे, किसने कोई अगर गलती कर दी तो मेरी बेइज्जती होगी, तो ज़रा देख लो किसने कोई गलती. It's very intimidating. And the point was that you start with the idea that the currency used in the fundamental token of value or instrument of value for DAOs is reputation. अगर आपकी reputation तगड़ी है तो लोग इसमें शिरकत करेंगे. So if reputation is your basic token, then depending on how the investment plays out over various time horizons, the investment becomes more valuable. The reputation token शुरू में infinite life से शुरू करता है जो कि it's a too exaggerated an assumption, and then you simplify to a more realistic time horizon. And so the present value calculations of that are done, derived over various horizons to understand how reputation tokens are mathematically applicable. तो अगर researchers को ये देख के खौफ आया है तो फिर मैं मुतमईन हूँ. एक छोटा सा चैप्टर था, चैप्टर 6, जिसमें उसने कहा कि अक्सर अगर आप ये ऑनलाइन चेक करें तो लोग फलानी चीज़ कहते हैं और हकीकत में कुछ और है. It was a very short 3 pages जिसमें वो कहता है कि ये चीज़ें कही जा रही हैं और हकीकत कुछ और है. It was just a nice ending to the introductory section. This is the most innovative, I would say, chapter in the whole book. And now we are in the second part of the book where we talk about the opportunities and challenges. So Primavera and Tara, they used exstitutional theory, for which in fact ज़्यादातर काम पहले भी इन्होंने ही किया था इस theory पे. There are, and you will understand this from any organization including CAS, there is the institution and its institutional factors. Then there are the exstitution and exstitutional factors. For example, we have policies at CAS, and then we follow them. We have frameworks which are informed by Government of Pakistan rules or by Air Force rules. But then there are exstitutional factors, the norms and the culture, which is influenced by, for researchers, the institutions where they studied. It is influenced by a strong Air Force culture because we have senior people from the Air Force. Those norms and values and cultures also play a very large role. And oftentimes, particularly in the early days of CAS, a lot of things were just gentlemen's agreements. The policies were not there, but we worked in a dignified and hardworking manner, in an exstitutional manner, or governed by exstitutional factors. This idea of exstitution applies even more so in DAOs because एक तरफ आपने smart contract में चीज़ें डाल तो दी हैं, लेकिन हेरा फेरी और गड़बड़ रोकने के लिए आपको शराफत से काम करना पड़ेगा, which is an exstitutional element. And the way that norms are created online is different because in CAS we know each other, we see each other, but in a digital world you don't know who the counterparty is. So how the exstitutional norms impact this society, the micro-society, plays a big part. And there are two important things that they highlight. The first is confidence, and the second is trust. One part is based on the rules and the institution, that this is how it works, and I trust that this works. And the second is having the confidence कि ये चीज़ है सही, I feel that it is right, or I'm based in norms that are right. Both of them are important. This was a fascinating analysis, and I have subsequently drawn upon their exstitutional theory in other research, which will be published in 2025. Because I think it is very interesting for the digital world and the norms of the amorphous digital sphere. Then Maury and Jonas, they talk about a very specific problem. DAOs, as you can imagine, because it seeks to reorganize everything, and it works in a very amorphous and decentralized world, its basis in our legal systems doesn't quite exist. And these are legal professors and practitioners. So they argue that there's a mismatch. So either you update the laws, or you update the DAOs, the actual technology, or you update both, because there are cases pending. For example, there is a state in the United States which wants to be more technologically active. वैसे वो मतलब देहाती इलाका है, Wyoming. And Wyoming has a case pending on whether DAOs work as organization. The decision of that sort will then impact other legal issues. And this is always an important part of new technologies. How do they fit into the existing legal frameworks? This applies as much to areas of warfare, whether it's international law, humanitarian law. Same applies to things like DAOs, whether it forms in corporate law or organizational law and labor law and all those other things. So the legal treatment is very, very important. And we don't know the final answer until judgments of the sort that Wyoming has to make are finally made. और उसकी अपील भी होगी, तो ये एक लंबा सिलसिला है, ये अभी ख़त्म नहीं होगा. Finally, this was my chapter. I was basically taking the governance element of my original paper, which continues to be cited a lot, and looking at what are the elements that make these communities work. Because इसमें जो है आप वोट डाल के अपना हिस्सा डालते हैं, फैसले इस तरह होते हैं. So how do you, if I have 10 votes but Zara has 30 votes, who will have a larger voice? Is it that we have equal despite her putting in so much more money? There will be an asymmetry of power within it. Plus, I might not care so much about this particular DAO because I have invested in 10 of them, but she is invested entirely in this one, so her stake is much greater in that, so she'll take a bigger voice and she may persuade me to just put my vote with her. These are problems of democratic systems in general, but they become all the more complex in a digital sphere. So how do you govern the digital sphere where everybody has agreed to certain rules, which are limited, and then governed by norms outside that, and then having systems work together? Ye mera kaam tha. This is my contribution to the book, not just editorial, but also as an author, ye tha. Aside from the philosophy, jo aapne chapter 4 mein dekha tha. And the last chapter is vulnerability mapping. So this is an applied example. Kelsey Nabin, she sat with actual practitioners of this stuff, and she built out a template or a framework of what are the vulnerabilities of this system. And then they used that to then map out what are the weaknesses and then sought to remedy them. So you can see that when scholars work together with industry to map the vulnerabilities, to solve problems, you can come up with better solutions. So that was an applied case that you have value in this as long as everybody is working together and you're aware of the weaknesses and are able to fix them. That was the last example of a DAO in practice. So then, at the end of the book, we present some important conclusions. One important thing is that the definition that I have given you is not a final or ultimate definition. There are issues. People disagree on what a DAO is. Jo boundaries aapne us diagram mein dekhi thi, they are not hard and fast. So this will happen and interpretation issues will persist. The second thing is that there's many purposes and design formulations that are possible. So when you read our book, you get ideas for new formulations which are not absolute. And the third is that the community element of this is probably as strong as the investment part of it or the technology part of it. That people can work together in the digital world in a community manner is very interesting. Finally, we had to emphasize that the legal overhang is significant. If not perfect, DAOs at least offer something different. And हमने अपने हथियार डाल दिए. The future path of DAOs is indeterminate. We don't know where this technology will go. We are simply creating an important memento to it or a roadmap for it, but we don't actually know what will happen to these. In the worst case scenario, DAOs will be seen as a relic of an interesting innovation, but it doesn't proceed. In the best case scenario, वो जो आप 22 billion देख रहे हैं, वो 2 trillion भी हो सकता है. कौन रोक रहा है? लोगों की जब तक दिलचस्पी है इसमें मज़ीद इसको फ़रोग़ दिया जा सकता है, मज़ीद इससे सरमाया हो सकता है. So we don't know these things. The aim is to be a definitive academic text on the subject, all angles and a robust structure. I have given you a general picture of that through this presentation. And teams like ours working together, having an interest in the modern world and its systems technologically, economically, socially, you can come up with fun ideas. And that's why this book project, like book 7 before this, were fascinating endeavors that make a contribution to academic literature at a world level. ये पाकिस्तान में कौन पढ़ेगा? अल्लाह जानता है, दुनिया में लोग पढ़ेंगे. So आपको कैस के लोग जो हैं, वो दुनिया को अपनी आवाज़ पहुंचा रहे हैं और वो देख के कहते हैं, चाहिए Pakistan mein ye kaam aur kya baat hai? That kind of thing. We are participating in a world community and pushing the literature forward. So all of my colleagues are European or Europeanized, और एक मैं हूँ वाहिद बंदा. And it doesn't matter because हम सारे मिल के काम कर सकते हैं with our norms, with our institutions and institutional factors. So that is the culmination of a successful project. अब इससे क्या होता है आगे there's a book 9 and a book 10 coming, for sure. और आगे जाके देखते हैं book 11 और book 12 किन मौज़ूआत पे होंगे, inshallah. But that's for 26 and 27. So I have this roadmap in my mind कि किस तरह ये जो मैंने सर जावेद को कैस के शुरू में 2018-19 में जो बताया था कि 50 किताबें आएंगी, वो जो है वो देखेंगे कहाँ से किस तरह आएंगी, inshallah. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Whether your focus is on tech, policy, or investment, this book on decentralized autonomous organizations, it offers insights that can both inspire and inform. I now request President CAS Air Marshal Javed Ahmed to deliver the concluding remarks for today's event. Please, sir.
बिस्मिल्लाह रहमान रहीम. Before I start, फारूक आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे डॉक्टर साहब के लिए?
Sir, like it is always actually astonishing to see, to actually, because we know him since now about 2.5 years, the way he works, it is actually very inspiring. In such little time that we have, that we are not able to do anything, and he is able to produce books after books. And each book that he has produced in the CAS has been on subjects which were entirely new for us. First, his passion for the public policy and the things related to that, and subsequently shifting towards technology, talking about NFTs, and now this book. Whenever I have read his book, I have not read a complete book of his up till now, but the excerpts that I've gone through, or the chapters that I've gone through, what actually makes me feel, I mean, I get so inspired from him, is that he always includes the angle of philosophy and also sometimes religion in that, literature in that. And so when he amalgamates all these things into the subject of economics, something which comes out is actually absolutely wonderful. And that is the beauty of the writing that I've seen of Dr. Usman. And it actually speaks very high of a person that who is very comfortable, at ease with all these subjects together. And that is, I think, his main strength.
I would also request Ambassador Naila as a professional, not as a mother, to comment on his works, please.
Thank you so much for this honor. It's difficult to delink the two parts of me, being a mother and being a professional. I think as a professional, I would say it's a very interesting book. Dr. Saab, heartiest congratulations on this. At this moment, you know, the world societies are in transition between the traditional structures and the modern structures. And the younger generation, the Gen Z and all, are more into these fluid systems that you call DAOs, while the older lot like myself are more geared to the centralized institutions. And this reflects very well on that. But I think that to control or to monitor, which also becomes an issue due to this anti-money laundering issues and, you know, funds not being properly followed. DAOs are very fluid. So regulating them and bringing them into mainstream would also be a challenge. I'm sure your next books will cover all these issues, but thank you so much for this contribution.
Dr. Saab, congratulations once again. Every now and then I come across a request that Dr. Saab has written a chapter or a book, which is quite often. He is also very modest in suggesting that we have a in-house small get-together, of which I'm not a great fan. I always want that more people should benefit from the work which he undertakes in very specialized domains. So this is the last of the in-house that we do. I think the next time I would love to have more experts come and comment on your works. Dr. Saab is also my advisor. I am very keen to ask him whether the economy is sinking or is on the rise, and he typically gives me a PTV answer. So, and I ask him what is happening to the aerospace sector, because his the topics which it takes studies on are very diverse in nature. Dr. Saab, अगर मैं पुराने वक्तों में जाऊँ तो is also the oldest member of CAS. He was there once we started to establish CAS, and we go a long way. And I remember once we wanted to select all these tiles, तो मैंने कहा टाइलिंग कौन सी, कहते मुझे टाइलिंग में कुछ पता नहीं, आप बताएं. So we undertook a lot of studies. He has a lot of institutional memory of where we were then and where we are right now, and alhamdulillah we've come a very long way. We undertook some very interesting studies in those days also. Once was after swift retort, once we had the Indians thinking of waging a war, and we did a study, cost of war, and he told me, sir मुझे तो कुछ पता नहीं जंग का. मैंने कहा इकोनॉमी पे आप लिख लो, जंग का मैं. So we came up with a very interesting cost of war article, and the Indians had they were terrified, because the cost of war came out to be in billions, almost unaffordable for the Indians, and we took a lot of flack. And every day you will have an Indian comment ke ye aapka data galat hai, and there are things. So they were the good old days, and if I look उस ज़माने में डॉक्टर साहब कहाँ थे, and he promised that he will start to work on a lot of areas. And where Dr. Saab is right now, I think he's taken a lot of challenges and studies. He was also, in fact, a teacher in those days, because we were not very familiar with citations क्या होती हैं, starting from the basics of the writing skills. How do you write? How do you cite? How are these citations? What are the international systems which? So he used to teach all of us, कि sir ये इस तरह करना है, इस तरह करना है. And I think over the years he's also trained a lot of young researchers. Zara is one. She sits over here. और डॉक्टर साहब जब ठंडे मौसम में यूरोप में थे, तो I was after Zara to prepare monthly briefs, so you could find that she'd picked up from what Dr. Saab had taught her. Dr. Saab के वैसे अगर if you look at his qualities, he is a very prolific writer. It's I think very challenging to write on these subjects which are truly international in nature. I don't find too many Pakistani authors involving themselves in international systems, and that I think is one of the biggest weaknesses of Pakistan. If you talk of law, you will not have lawyers who deal with international law. And I remember recently once we were discussing the Indus Water Treaty, and we came to a conclusion that the Indians have very strong legal teams, whereas Pakistan employs lawyers from abroad. So we have very weak institutions. If you want to privatize PIA, we outsource the privatization process, spending $7 million in the entire system, and to come up with only one vendor who came and wanted to buy an airline. So we have very weak systems. And now to work on the international systems and to be able to comment on where the world is going in terms of technology and finances is a very important subject. And Dr. Saab, young professional in this subject. Dr. Saab can also identify with directors and also with the researchers. He is mashallah so young to have reached a stage where he has written almost, and after this will inaugurate a complete section of his books in the library. So this is a great achievement, Dr. Saab, mashallah, and my felicitations once again. Working habits wise, you really, शुरू में जब मैं था तो डॉक्टर साहब आते थे, सूप लेके आते थे घर से, and used to be in office, but I think then he tailored his working to, I would say, brain train. So he's trained his brain to work at night and to produce work. It's never created a problem because he's constantly working. So he's very familiar with the new ways of working, staying in touch with the world, because once Pakistan sleeps, the world wakes up in the West. So we understand all those working, and because you are producing some good work, so Dr. Saab का ये काम करने का तरीका है, and we respect his working habits. शाम को वैसे आपने डॉक्टर साहब को देखना हो informally, तो he is very fond of Chinese, so you will find him even in this chilly weather, you'll find him in shorts at sizzling walk. So, वहाँ डॉक्टर साहब पाए जाते हैं, but I think congratulations once again. Because there is always something to learn from your presentations, although a lot of us do not understand the pure terminologies and where these systems are going. Our main concerns remain with Pakistan, where Pakistan's economy is heading. And we always, because one of our core competencies is strategic foresight, we are very keen to know that are we in the right direction. Every month, every 15 days I ask him, is the economy heading up in the right direction? And don't give me the PTV answer. And we come up with challenges which we can predict that this is where you're heading, and maybe the news do not give you a perspective of the challenging situation in which Pakistan is. And from that perspective, his work is also very important for the monthly foresight which we send to the air headquarters. You know, his study, I always tell him to go deeper into studies and recommend to the armed forces, because the armed forces look at the budget from a different perspective. And these are very challenging times. And more to learn from today's presentation. I learned shugli is an English word. Shugli was another word. So thank you very much for giving us this short talk. But as I said, that this is the last time we will have a smaller audience to look at your works. I would also suggest that maybe we can arrange these small presentations at a forum which specially looks at the economy. Maybe we can look at some collaborative events with PIDE or any other think tank where I feel people should benefit from and understand the work which you are undertaking. Okay? So great job done, and we are very proud of you, Dr. Saab.
Actually, sir, he has proved us wrong on another account, and that is we had predicted on the launch of his 6th book that probably the next 2 years will be dry for reasons that he knows very well. But I think they have been very productive years, and he's produced 2 books in 1 year.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
But the last line that the future of DAOs is indeterminable, so please.
Let's close this event with another round of applause for Dr. Chohan and all the other esteemed authors who have contributed to this remarkable book. And together they have crafted a work that undoubtedly enriches our existing literature and brings a significant value to the collective knowledge. I would now like to invite President Kass and Dr. Usman Chohan to come forward for a photograph. There. Next, I would like to request Dr. Usman's mother to join in for a group photograph. And next, I would like to request all the directors to join in for a group photograph. You all are kindly requested to proceed to the library for the launch of Dr. Usman's book space, and then we'll be having refreshments in the tea bar.